Chapter 1. The sharp, sickening crunch of bone echoed across the cold stone courtyard. I didn't even blink once. A rogue shifter whimpered at my heavy black boots. He was bleeding all over the bright, clean white snow. I felt no pity. I felt no anger. I felt nothing at all inside my chest. "Exile," I ordered. My voice was pure, cracking ice. Because the law is the absolute law, I had to be very cruel. Elder Silas stood right behind me like a tall, dark shadow. He taught me this exact painful lesson many years ago. Weakness gets you killed, just like foolish love got my own parents killed. I still remember the thick, awful smell of their warm blood mixing with the wet dirt when I was just a little boy. That is a sad, terrible story I will never, ever forget. That's why I locked my soft heart away in a cold, heavy iron box. Still, the bitter winter wind bit at my face as I turned away. I walked slowly back toward my private pack quarters. My heavy boots clicked loudly against the frozen stone path. Weeks ago, I publicly rejected my true fated mate, Nora. Her pretty name tasted like dry, bitter ash in my mouth. I did it right in front of the whole staring pack. It was a clean surgical cut. A very necessary move to stay strong and independent as a leader. I didn't feel a single thing when she cried softly, or so I deeply thought. Because if I truly didn't care about her, why was my chest aching so badly right now? Why was I so bone-tired every single day? Soon after, I pushed through my giant, heavy oak doors. The eerie quiet of my bedroom hit me fast. It was extremely thick and heavy. I walked right over to the tall glass mirror on the brick wall. And just like that, everything changed. My reflection started to blur. The bright silver rings in my dark eyes swirled like a crazy, stormy sea. A massive, sharp migraine stabbed right behind my eyes. It felt exactly like jagged animal claws scraping the inside of my skull. What's worse, my big hands began to shake uncontrollably. I hid them deep inside my warm coat pockets. I am Alpha Kieran Ashford. I absolutely do not shake. Before I could move, my knees hit the hardwood floor. Hard. What followed was pure, blinding agony. My strong bones felt like they were melting on hot fire. A low, wet growl tore right out of my throat. But I didn't make that wild animal sound. The human me didn't make that sound at all. I didn't know what scared me more. The burning, terrible pain, or the wild beast waking up deep inside me. Have you ever felt your own mind slip away? It is a terrifying, dizzy drop into deep, dark water. You reach out, but there is absolutely nothing to hold on to. Between one breath and the next, the dark shadows pulled me completely under, dragging me into a nightmare I couldn't escape. Chapter 2. Sunlight burned my heavy eyelids. Come morning, the cold stone floor felt like a giant slab of ice against my bare chest. I gasped loudly. My lungs burned like I had just run 100 fast miles in the dark. Something rough and very sharp scratched my left cheek. Pine needles. I sat up fast, my heavy head spinning in crazy circles. I looked down at my body. I was completely naked on the floor of my own locked bedroom. Worse, dark brown forest dirt caked my pale skin. I tasted old, dirty copper on my tongue. Blood. I was tasting thick blood. But I wasn't bleeding anywhere on my body. Whose blood was inside my mouth? Fear stole my breath completely away. I am the strong alpha. I am the one in absolute control of this entire pack. Yet here I was, looking exactly like a wild, feral animal who spent the whole night digging in the dirt. Because an alpha must never show a single ounce of fear or weakness, I had to hide this fast. I scrambled quickly up to my bare feet. My strong legs shook badly like thin leaves in the wind. Instead of calling for my trusted guards, I rushed straight into the large bathroom. I turned the shower handle to boiling hot. I stood bravely under the scalding, steaming water. I scrubbed my dirty arms. I scrubbed my wide chest. I scrubbed my skin totally raw. The hot water turned brown from the mud, and then bright pink from the mysterious blood. What did I do last night in the dark woods? I couldn't remember a single second of it. Just a scary, empty blackout. A giant, confusing hole in my brain. Moments later, a loud, heavy knock hit my thick bedroom door. "Alpha Kieran?" A deep guard's voice called out. "Elder Silas requests you in the main council room, now." My stomach dropped right to the cold floor. Silas was the harsh man who raised me from a little boy. He was almost like a strict father to me. On the other hand, he was also a ruthless, scheming snake. He saw every little mistake anyone ever made. If he knew I was totally losing my mind, he would lock me away in the dark pack dungeons forever. I remembered the scary bedtime story of the last crazy alpha, chained up tightly in the damp dark until he slowly starved to death. I would never, ever let that happen to me, so I forced my heavy, panicked breathing to slow down. I walked carefully to my large closet. I put on my best tailored black suit. It felt like my safe armor against the dangerous world. Before I left the quiet room, I stared deeply into the bathroom mirror again. My eyes looked totally cold, flat, and dead. Perfect. By the time I opened my heavy door, I looked like the perfect, flawless pack leader. But deep inside my chest, a tiny, terrified voice screamed in pure terror. I stepped out into the bright, sunny hallway, leaving my dirty, bloody secret behind closed doors, ready to face the very monsters who made me. Chapter 3. The Grand Pack Council room smelled strongly like musty old books and sour, dark magic. Elder Silas sat stiffly at the head of the long, polished wooden table. His dark, sharp eyes locked right onto mine like a hungry hawk watching a tiny mouse. "You look quite pale this morning, Kieran," Silas murmured softly. His voice was super smooth, just like warm, dangerous poison honey. "I am perfectly fine," I lied smoothly. My deep voice didn't shake at all. Meanwhile, 5 other old pack elders muttered quietly to each other. They were angry old wolves, totally stuck in their mean, ancient ways. "We have a serious pack problem," Silas said flatly. He slid a large, rolled-up paper map across the smooth table. "The useless fringe dwellers. They are getting way too close to our new warrior training grounds. We need to clear them out fast. Burn their little cabins down. Evict all of them." I looked down at the old map. The outer fringes. That was the dangerous edge of the dark, whispering woods. Because she was a sad, rejected outcast, that was exactly where Nora lived, all alone. Just hearing the sudden thought of her name made my chest ache so incredibly badly. Why? I didn't care about her soft feelings at all. I was the cold, mean monster who broke her loving heart on purpose in front of everyone. "Sign the official eviction order," Silas pushed hard, tapping the rough paper. "Show the whole pack your true unstoppable alpha strength." I reached my hand out for the heavy black ink pen, but then the stale air in the room suddenly shifted. Without warning, a beautiful sweet smell hit my nose, fresh lavender and clean spring rain. It was a soft, warm, gentle scent. It smelled exactly like safe home. My hand froze stiffly in midair. Where was that amazing smell coming from? There were definitely no fresh flowers in this dark, gloomy room, just bitter old angry men. In that moment, a strange phantom feeling brushed softly against my tired mind. It felt exactly like a soft, warm human hand gently stroking my thick fur. The weird feeling was so incredibly real my eyes fluttered shut for a quick, secret second. "Kieran!" Silas barked very loudly. His sharp, angry voice snapped me right back to harsh reality. I blinked hard. The sweet, beautiful smell completely vanished into thin air. I was definitely losing my mind. The scary, bloody blackouts. The weird, loving phantom smells. I needed to get out of this stuffy, crowded room right now, because I desperately needed open space to breathe. I dropped the heavy pen loudly on the table. "No," I growled loudly. "I will not sign this order blindly." Truth be told, Silas looked totally shocked. He frowned deep, his thin, pale lips pulled back into an ugly, mean sneer. "Excuse me?" "I am the alpha of this entire pack," I roared, letting my raw, heavy wolf power bleed deeply into my loud voice. "I will inspect the outer fringes myself. I will carefully decide if they actually need to go. With every heartbeat, the large room grew quieter and much quieter. Silas stared at me with pure, cold fury. He really, truly hated being challenged by anyone, even me. Very well, Silas finally agreed softly, his dark eyes narrowing into tiny little slits. But do not let stupid soft weakness cloud your alpha judgment. I quickly turned around and walked straight out of the tense room. I had to strongly prove I was in total control of my own mind. I had to go see the quiet fringes with my own 2 eyes. As a result, I was walking right into a massive, dangerous trap, heading straight toward the only woman who could completely destroy my cold, lonely world. Chapter 4. The cold black water of my mind swallowed me whole again. It happened right in the middle of the dark, ancient forest. Between one breath and the next, the human me completely vanished. I was no longer a man in a sharp black suit. Instead, I was a massive, powerful silver wolf. My 4 huge paws slammed hard into the wet, muddy ground. I could smell absolutely everything. The sharp scent of wet pine needles, the sour smell of old decay, and something else. Something dark and twisted. Without warning, the thick shadows themselves jumped out at me. They were scary, unnatural creatures made of pure black magic. Because they possessed no real heartbeat, I couldn't hear them sneaking up behind me. A sharp, icy claw ripped deeply down my left side. Agony, a loud, terrible gargle tore right out of my wide throat. I snapped my massive jaws, crushing a shadowy creature into dark dust. But there were simply too many of them. They slashed my back. They bit my legs. Blood, hot and bright red, spilled all over my silver fur. I fought for my life. I fought for my secret. I fought just to take one more breath. Still, my heavy legs began to fail me. I was bleeding out fast onto the dark forest floor. Because a weak, bleeding wolf is just free food for the hungry crows, I knew I was going to die right here in the mud. But then, the wind suddenly shifted. It carried a very faint, beautiful smell. Lavender and clean spring rain. The scent hit my wet nose, and my dying heart skipped a loud beat. Mate. The wild beast inside my chest knew that sweet smell. It was my true home. It was my safe place. As if pulled by an invisible string, my body moved totally on pure instinct. I dragged my torn, bleeding body away from the dark shadows. I limped heavily toward the very edge of the wild woods. Eventually, a tiny, glowing yellow light peeked through the thick trees. A small, lonely cabin. By the time I reached the wooden porch, I was completely blind with pain. I collapsed hard against the heavy front door. Thud. Before I could move again, the door creaked slowly open. Warm yellow light spilled right over my bloody silver fur. A small, gentle hand reached out, shaking softly in the cold air. Oh my God. A sweet, terrified voice whispered softly. And just like that, the dark, heavy curtain fell hard over my mind again. Chapter 5. Come morning, the darkness finally, slowly lifted. My human eyes snapped wide open. I gasped for a deep breath of air. The soft silk sheets of my own grand bed twisted tightly around my sweaty legs. I was back in my locked room, but my entire body felt like it had been crushed by heavy falling rocks. I tried to sit up, but a sharp, burning pain shot right through my left side. I looked down quickly. What I saw made my cold blood turn completely to pure ice. Thick, crude black thread zigzagged across my pale skin. Someone had carefully sewn my torn, broken flesh tightly back together. A thick, messy layer of crushed green herbs was smeared right over the ugly red wounds. Have you ever felt completely and totally violated in your own private home? I was the most powerful alpha in the entire territory. Yet someone out there knew my deepest, darkest secret. They knew I was the crazy, wild silver wolf. What's worse, the herbal paste smelled exactly like fresh lavender and sweet rain. My heart pounded so loudly in my chest. It was the exact same beautiful smell from the pack council room. The exact same smell that stopped my dying wolf heart in the dark woods. Because an alpha must always project total, unbreakable invulnerability, I had to hide these fresh wounds from everyone right now. I carefully wrapped my bleeding ribs in tight, white cotton bandages. Every single movement was pure, absolute agony. But my spinning mind raced faster than my hurting body. Who patched me up in the dark? More importantly, how did I get all the way back to my locked bedroom before the bright sun came up? It was a massive, scary mystery, a dangerous loop I desperately needed to close before Elder Silas found out. Truth be told, my wild beast was living a completely secret second life without me. And whoever saved that wild beast was living right on the dangerous edge of our packlands. Because of that, I knew exactly where I had to go today. I threw on my thick winter coat to hide my bulky bandages. I needed hard, undeniable proof. I was going straight to the isolated fringes. Chapter 6. That morning, the bitter winter wind whipped fiercely around my giant black horse. I rode totally alone. The dark, twisted trees of the Whispering Woods loomed dangerously on my left side. The neat, safe pack village stayed far behind on my right. Soon after, the tiny, run-down cabin finally came into my sharp view. It sat perfectly on the lonely, quiet border between the two worlds. I tied my horse to a dead, gray tree. My chest ached terribly with every single breath I took. I walked heavily up the creaky wooden porch steps. There was a giant dark red stain right on the wood. Dried blood. My blood. Without thinking, I pushed the thin front door wide open. The air inside hit me extremely hard. Lavender and rain. It was so incredibly thick and sweet it made my head spin in circles. The tiny room was very neat but totally poor. Because I needed hard proof, I quickly searched the tiny, warm room. My sharp eyes locked onto a small wooden bucket sitting in the corner. Inside, the dirty water floated bloody, torn white rags, and stuck to the wet rags were thick clumps of bright, shiny silver fur. My lungs completely stopped working. The proof was right here. "Get out," a sharp, angry voice suddenly yelled. I spun around super fast, totally ignoring the horrible pain in my wrapped ribs. Nora stood frozen, right in the open doorway. She dropped a heavy basket of cut firewood onto the floor. Her messy brown hair blew wildly around her pale, beautiful face. The moment our eyes locked, a strange, hot fire bloomed right beneath my cold skin. My hidden wolf absolutely roared in pure joy. "Mate." But the human me stood completely frozen like a tall, dark statue. She looked at me with pure hate. She looked at me with deep fear. She looked at me like a true, awful monster. Because I broke her sweetheart in public weeks ago, she deeply despised my cruel human face. She wrapped her thin arms tightly around her small chest, shaking like a little leaf. "I told you to stay away from me, Alpha," she whispered sharply. Her voice trembled badly. "Leave my home right now before my guardian comes back." My breath caught hard in my dry throat. "Your guardian?" "A giant silver wolf," she said fiercely, lifting her pretty chin up bravely. "He is massive. He is very dangerous. And he will easily tear your throat out if he finds you inside here." In the quiet that followed, the heavy truth completely unraveled right in front of me. She didn't know. No matter how hard she tried to act brave, she had no idea the terrifying monster she hated, and the wild beast she was fiercely protecting, were the exact same person. And just like that, my neatly divided cold world began to violently shatter into a million broken pieces. Chapter 7. I didn't say a single word to her. I just turned around and ran right out of that tiny cabin. Because the horrifying truth was simply too heavy to carry, I rode my giant black horse back to the safe pack compound like a terrified coward. Soon after, I locked myself deep inside the old dusty pack library. I bypassed Elder Silas completely. Truth be told, I didn't trust that smiling, dangerous man anymore. The grand library smelled exactly like rotting paper and cold, damp stone. I searched the dusty shelves. I flipped the brittle pages. I hunted for the hidden truth. I desperately needed to know what kind of dark magic was splitting my brain right in half. Eventually, my shaking fingers found a tiny black leather book hidden behind a loose red brick. The pages were incredibly old and yellow. Inside, a terrible word jumped right out at my dark eyes. Severance. Because this was highly forbidden magic, a cold chill ran straight down my spine. The old book explained everything perfectly. The severance curse forcefully rips a werewolf's human mind completely away from his wild beast soul. It is usually used to make a perfect, emotionless killing machine. But who exactly cast this evil thing on me? What did Silas secretly trade to get his hands on this dark magic? That was a terrifying question for another day. What's worse, the book warned that the curse grows incredibly unstable around true mates. Because of that, my cold human walls were finally starting to crack wide open. Meanwhile, a bright, silvery light suddenly spilled right through the tall glass window. The full moon was rising fast in the black night sky. Without warning, a fresh, hot wave of pure agony smashed into my chest. My strong bones instantly began to snap and violently pop. I couldn't stop it this time. The magic was way too strong. In that moment, the human me screamed out loud as the wild beast violently tore its way out to go see our beautiful mate. Chapter 8. Between one breath and the next, my 4 huge paws tore through the thick, wet woods. I wasn't the angry, confused alpha anymore. I was just the massive silver wolf, and I desperately needed my sweet mate. As if pulled by a string, I burst right out of the dark trees and ran straight up onto her wooden porch. I scratched hard at her front door. Scratch. Scratch. Before she could move away, the door opened wide. Nora gasped loudly, dropping a small tin cup. Because she saw my heavy bandages were totally gone, her pretty brown eyes filled with total shock. She fell right to her soft knees and hugged my thick, furry neck tightly. I buried my wet nose deep into her warm shoulder. Lavender and rain. She smelled so perfect. She fed me warm meat. She brushed my thick fur. She healed my broken heart. My long tail wagged so hard it thumped loudly against the wooden floorboards. Yet, a few minutes later, she started to cry very softly. Hot, salty tears dropped right onto my silver head. "He came here today," she whispered to me, her voice breaking terribly. "The cruel alpha. He looked right at me with his dead, cold eyes. Why does he hate me so much, boy? What did I ever do to him?" A low, sad whine escaped my throat. I licked the salty tears right off her warm cheek. I wanted to tell her the absolute truth. I wanted to say sorry for all the terrible pain. But I was just a dumb, mute animal right now. Because my human half was a complete monster, she was crying all alone in the dark. Will she ever forgive the terrible man hiding inside this loving beast? That night, I curled my massive body tightly around her tiny frame, keeping her warm until the bright sun came up. Come morning, the brutal magic violently snapped me back into my human skin. I woke up completely naked in the cold, wet forest dirt. And just like that, I buried my face in my dirty hands and wept bitterly, realizing I was the exact monster who broke my own mate's beautiful soul. Chapter 9. By the time I snuck back into the pack compound, my red eyes were completely dry. I put my sharp black suit back on. I had to lie smoothly. I had to smile coldly. I had to play his dangerous game. Because an alpha can never show a single tear to anyone, I stood tall and proud when Elder Silas marched right into my private office. He slammed a heavy, bloody piece of silver fur down onto my wooden desk. "Our scouts found this ugly thing near the fringes," Silas hissed angrily. He smelled sharply like old mint and fresh sweat. "There is a massive, dangerous rogue wolf living in the Whispering Woods. It is a huge threat to our pack safety. Have you ever had to look your worst enemy right in the eye and fake a polite smile?" My heart pounded furiously against my sore ribs. That was my own silver fur sitting right there on the desk. "A rogue?" I asked smoothly, raising one dark eyebrow. I leaned forward in my tall leather chair. "Yes," Silas barked loudly. "And worse, we think it is bothering that useless outcast, Nora. I want you to lead a large hunting party today. Track this wild beast down and kill it immediately." Before either could speak again, the heavy air in the room turned completely to cold ice. Silas was watching my face way too closely. He was definitely testing me. If I said no, he would quickly know I cared about Nora. On the other hand, if I said yes, I would be actively hunting my own damn self. More importantly, I would be leading a group of armed killers right straight to Nora's quiet front door. Because of that, I gave him a very slow, cruel nod. Of course, Silas, I lied clearly through my perfectly straight teeth. I will gladly hunt this ugly monster down myself. With every step he took out of my quiet office, a dark, desperate plan formed quickly in my mind. I was going to lead this stupid hunting party straight into the deep woods, and I was going to sabotage the entire thing from the inside out. Chapter 10. The heavy, sour smell of cheap silver and nervous sweat choked the cold forest air. I marched right at the very front of 30 armed pack warriors. My dark boots crunched loudly against the dead, dry leaves. We were hunting a ghost. We were hunting me. "Spread out right now," I commanded loudly. My deep voice echoed like thunder. Because I needed to keep these angry men far away from Nora's quiet cabin, I pointed them toward the rocky northern cliffs. I lied to my best trackers. I confused my strongest warriors. I betrayed my own pack. Have you ever tried to hold a wild fighting beast tightly inside a small glass cage? My thick skin literally crawled. The silver wolf inside me scratched furiously at my chest. He desperately wanted to run back to his sweet mate. He wanted to protect her from this dangerous world. Yet, I had to play the cold, unfeeling human alpha. I walked strictly, keeping my wide shoulders totally stiff. As the wind shifted, a brand new smell suddenly hit my sharp nose. It was not the smell of normal pack wolves. It was thick, rotting meat, and dark, burning ozone. Shadow magic. My heart skipped a massive beat. Silas didn't just send me out here to hunt. He secretly sent his own elite strike team of dark shadow assassins. What's worse, that nasty smell was blowing straight from the quiet fringes. They were heading directly for Nora's little home. When I was a tiny, helpless boy, I once got totally lost in these dark woods at night. I remember crying under a big oak tree while scary, dark shapes moved in the foggy shadows. I was incredibly terrified back then. I felt that exact same sickening terror right now. Without thinking, I stopped completely dead in my tracks. "Alpha?" my lead tracker asked slowly, looking at my pale face. I didn't answer him at all. I couldn't. Because the terrifying thought of Nora dying made my blood boil like hot lava, I totally lost control. I let out a massive, terrifying roar that shook the trees. As if the forest watched, I abandoned my confused men completely. I turned around and sprinted faster than any normal human ever could, rushing desperately into the dark shadows. Chapter 11. I didn't care who saw me run. I didn't care about my perfect cold reputation anymore. Between one breath and the next, I threw myself hard into the empty air. My expensive black suit ripped violently into 100 tiny shreds. Hot agony exploded deep inside my human bones as they violently snapped and shifted. By the time I hit the wet ground, I was the massive, unstoppable silver wolf. I tore through the thick bushes like a speeding bullet. The tiny cabin finally came into my sharp view. Without warning, 3 dark, shadowy figures kicked Nora's wooden front door completely open. She screamed, a loud, piercing sound that shattered my heart. A loud growl rose in my throat. I lunged forward, a fast blur of bright silver fur and pure hot fury. I crashed right into the first dark assassin, my giant jaws clamped tightly around his smoky neck. Crunch! He instantly dissolved into gross black ash. I spun around super fast. The second shadow raised a sharp silver blade. I tackled him hard onto the dirty wooden porch. My sharp claws ripped his chest wide open. I was fighting for my sweet mate. I was fighting for my own soul. But then, the third assassin threw a heavy glass bottle right at my face. It exploded with a bright, blinding flash of dark purple magic. The severance curse living deep inside my brain violently woke up. It violently clashed with the fresh, dark magic. And just like that, everything changed. The terrible pain ripped my wolf form completely apart. I fell hard onto the splintered floorboards. I shifted back. I didn't want to, but the cruel magic forcefully stripped my thick fur away. With every heartbeat, the thick smoke slowly cleared away. I pushed myself up onto my bare knees. I was totally human again. I was completely naked, and my chest was covered in sticky black blood. I looked up slowly, gasping for air. Nora stood pressed hard against her broken wall. She saw my bloody hands. She saw my naked chest. She saw the absolute truth. The moment our eyes locked, the small, hopeful light inside her pretty brown eyes completely died, replaced by absolute, horrifying terror. Chapter 12. The space between us burned. It burned like a hot, terrible fire. I knelt completely naked on her broken porch, staring up at the very woman I loved. I wanted to hold her tightly. I wanted to beg for her mercy. I wanted to stay forever. But the evil severance curse squeezed my human brain incredibly hard, locking all my warm feelings away. Nora, I tried to whisper softly. Instead, my voice came out extremely cold, flat, and commanding. It sounded exactly like the cruel alpha who broke her heart weeks ago. Pack your things right now. You are not safe here. Before she could move, she started to shake violently. She looked at my bloody human face, and then down at the silver wolf fur scattered on the floor. You, she choked out, pointing a shaking finger at me. You are the beast. You are the monster who hurt me. As the silence stretched, my chest ached worse than any deep knife wound. Do you know how much it hurts when the person you love looks at you like you are a scary demon? I remembered the warm, beautiful way my sweet mother used to look at my father. Pure, absolute love. Nora's look was the exact opposite of that beautiful memory. Because I couldn't fight the cold curse, my face remained totally blank and hard. Do not argue with me, I ordered sharply, my alpha tone forcing her to freeze. Get your bags. Run far away from the whispering woods. Deep down, I knew the awful truth. I was destroying our fragile bond right now. I was ruining everything. But I had to save her sweet life. At the same time, the loud, snapping sounds of heavy boots echoed from the dark trees. My main hunting party was getting very close. They were following my loud roar. If they found me totally naked and bloody right in front of the outcast's cabin, they would kill us both for treason. I had to make a terrible, heartbreaking choice. Without another word, I stood up quickly. I grabbed a torn, dirty blanket from the floor to cover my waist. I looked at her pale, tear-stained face one last time. Run, I commanded coldly, completely turning my broad back on my crying mate. I jumped off the wooden porch and sprinted back into the cold forest, leaving her totally confused and broken, racing toward a deadly confrontation with the evil man who made me this way. Chapter 13. The heavy wooden doors of the Grand Council room exploded inward with a loud crash, and the startled guards jumped back in pure fear, and I didn't care at all. What followed was wild, burning rage. I marched right past the shiny silver spears, and I totally ignored the sharp gasps from the old men, and I walked straight up to Elder Silas. He sat perfectly still in his tall leather chair. He smelled strongly like dry mint and old sour secrets. Have you ever realized that the person who protected you is actually the monster who ruined you? When I was just 10 years old, Silas handed me a sharp silver dagger. He ordered me to cut my favorite stuffed bear into tiny pieces, and he told me that love was a dangerous poison that killed my parents, and I foolishly believed his terrible lies for years. He built a cold, iron wall around my beating heart. Because I was completely done being his helpless puppet, I slammed both of my bloody fists onto his polished wooden table. Tell me the truth about the severance curse, I roared loudly. My deep voice shook the dusty glass windows. Tell me right now, or I will let my wild wolf tear your throat out. As the truth unraveled, Silas didn't even blink his dark eyes once. Instead, he just smiled, that oily, awful smile, and his dark eyes gleamed with wicked, cruel delight. He slowly steepled his long, pale fingers together. Because he truly thought he owned my entire soul, he laughed a cold, dry laugh that chilled my skin. You did this to yourself, Kieran, Silas murmured smoothly. leaning forward like a hungry snake. The dark magic only works because you are deeply terrified of love. I didn't force the curse to stay. You fed it. As long as you fear her, the curse holds you tight in its cold grip. My chest heaved heavily with ragged breaths. I hated his smooth voice. I hated his calm face. I hated my own stupid weakness. He was absolutely right. The curse survived entirely on my own deep fear of being weak. If I wanted to save Nora, I had to completely destroy my own human armor. I had to let the scary, vulnerable emotions back inside. Before he could speak another poisoned lie, I turned my broad back on the only twisted father I ever knew, walking quickly away to fix my terrible mistakes before the sun went down. Chapter 14. The cold night wind bit sharply right through my thin cotton shirt. I shivered deeply in the dark woods. That night, I didn't go back to the tiny cabin as the fierce, massive silver wolf, and I didn't go back as the cruel, untouchable alpha. I went back just as Kieran, a broken, bleeding man looking for pure forgiveness. Once I found a sick, starving, strayed dog freezing in the winter snow. I tried to feed it some warm meat, but it bit my hand out of pure terror, and I had to leave it all alone to eventually die. Was I acting exactly like that sick, scared dog right now? Because I desperately needed just 1 ounce of her trust, I knocked very softly on her broken wooden door. Tap. Tap. As the silence stretched, my heart hammered wildly in my tight chest and my sweaty palms shook uncontrollably. The sweet smell of lavender and clean rain drifted through the cracked window. The front door slowly creaked open. Nora stood there holding a sharp kitchen knife. Her beautiful brown eyes were swollen and very red from crying. She looked so tiny, and she looked so incredibly brave. "What do you want?" she whispered sharply, raising the shaking blade toward my chest. "Haven't you hurt me enough?" My knees hit the dirty wooden porch with a loud thud. I didn't try to stop myself. I bowed my head down, and I let all my thick, heavy armor fall completely away. "I want to be human," I choked out, fresh tears spilling hotly down my pale cheeks. The curse, it locked my soul away. "I am so sorry, Nora. Please, help me." She saw my fresh tears. She saw my raw pain. She saw the terrified boy hiding underneath the cruel alpha mask. In the stillness that followed, she slowly lowered the sharp silver blade, and she gently reached her warm, soft hand out to touch my wet cheek. Her thumb softly wiped a tear away. It was the most intimate, beautiful feeling in the entire world. Because her gentle touch felt like pure, healing magic, I leaned my heavy head deeply into her soft palm. "Kieran?" she breathed out softly, her voice full of warm, wonderful wonder. I looked up into her bright eyes, and our souls finally, truly connected. But the beautiful moment was suddenly violently shattered, dragging us straight into a deadly, burning nightmare. Chapter 15. Snap. A sickening, cold sound suddenly echoed deep inside my chest. Without warning, the dark failsafe violently triggered, and a massive wave of pure black agony ripped completely through my human nervous system. Silas was punishing me from far away. I gasped for air and I collapsed hard onto her wooden floor. A freezing, unnatural stiffness quickly spread through my veins. It felt exactly like thick, heavy ice freezing my warm blood solid. My strong arms went totally numb and my heavy legs stopped working completely. "Kieran!" Nora screamed loudly, dropping to her knees and grabbing my frozen shoulders. "What is happening to you?" To make things worse, heavy black boots pounded loudly right on the front porch, and Silas's scary shadow enforcers kicked the broken door completely off its metal hinges. 3 massive dark men marched right into the tiny room. They smelled like burning sulfur and dead leaves. Because I couldn't move a single muscle to fight them, I just lay there totally helpless like a broken, useless toy. Have you ever watched the only person you truly love get ripped violently away while you are totally frozen in place? The biggest enforcer grabbed my stiff arms and he dragged me roughly right out into the cold dirt. I couldn't even blink my wide eyes. Nora screamed in pure terror, and she fought them wildly with her small fists. She punched, she kicked, she scratched. but another dark man easily pushed her hard back inside the little cabin. As the sky darkened with thick clouds, a tall enforcer tossed a burning, oily torch right onto the cabin's dry wooden roof, and bright orange flames quickly climbed high up into the black night. The hot fire roared loudly, the black smoke choked the air, the dark magic squeezed my broken heart. Nora was trapped inside the burning room, and I couldn't save her. I couldn't shift into the wolf. I couldn't even scream her sweet name. The intense heat baked my pale face as they pulled me further and further away into the dark trees. Eventually, the rough men tossed my stiff, useless body into the back of a cold metal cart, driving me far away from the blazing bright light. And just like that, the wild wolf inside me completely stopped fighting, believing our beautiful mate was turning to gray ash. Chapter 16. Clang. The massive iron door slammed shut, locking me inside the black packed dungeon. My wrists were chained tightly to the damp, freezing stone wall. But these were no normal chains. They were coated in thick, poisonous silver and carved with glowing red runes. Because the glowing silver runes burned my bare skin, I screamed in pure, blinding agony. Every time I moved, the sharp metal bit deeper into my bleeding wrists. Have you ever watched a trapped black raven break its own wings against a tight metal cage? When I was a little boy, I saw a wild bird do exactly that. It panicked, it fought, it bled. Eventually, it just lay on the dirty floor and died from pure exhaustion. That broken, bleeding bird was exactly me right now. What's worse, the heavy, sour smell of damp mold and my own roasting flesh choked my lungs. I hung from the heavy chains, panting hard. My wild wolf was completely trapped beneath the dark, heavy magic. I could feel my beast suffocating inside my chest. Eventually, soft footsteps echoed down the dark hallway. Tap, tap, tap. Elder Silas stepped right into the dim, flickering torchlight. He wore a perfectly clean, sharp black suit. He looked totally calm and extremely happy. But then, my blurry eyes caught something incredibly strange on his right hand. He was wearing a shiny blue moonstone ring. My dead mother's favorite ring. Why did Silas have the exact ring she wore the night she was murdered? That terrifying mystery spun wildly in my dizzy head, an ugly puzzle piece I couldn't understand yet. You look terrible, Kieran. Silas mocked smoothly, shaking his gray head. I heard the heavy chains rattle. I felt the burning silver bite. I smelled my own roasting flesh. I tried to growl at him, but only thick blood spilled from my dry lips. Because he wanted me completely broken, he leaned in very close to my ear. Your little outcast friend is gone. She burned to gray ash inside that tiny, pathetic cabin. The bright fire took everything. Before the words left his lips, my entire world violently stopped spinning. No. I choked out weakly, my tears mixing with the hot blood on my face. Nora. As the sky darkened outside the dungeon walls, Silas just laughed a cold, evil laugh and walked away, leaving me completely alone in the freezing dark to drown in my own massive, crushing guilt. Chapter 17. As the silence stretched, a horrifying, hollow feeling ripped right through my chest. Do you know what absolute, dead silence really sounds like? It isn't just quiet. It is a heavy, crushing weight that completely flattens your soul. Inside my head, the warm, bright golden string that connected me to my sweet mate violently snapped. Because the beautiful mate bond went totally silent, I knew she was truly gone. She was dead. In that moment, the massive silver wolf inside me let out one final heartbreaking howl. It was a sound of pure, endless grief. Then, the beast just lay down in the dark corners of my mind. It closed its bright golden eyes. It gave up completely. When I was a teenager, I accidentally fell through the thin ice of a frozen winter lake. The freezing black water shocked my system so badly, I just stopped swimming. I let the cold water fill my burning lungs, sinking slowly into the dark deep. I didn't want to fight anymore. I was ready to totally surrender to the quiet, freezing water. I felt that exact same, heavy surrender right now. I stopped pulling at the burning silver chains. I let my heavy head fall forward. Truth be told, I had absolutely nothing left to live for. He broke my strong pack, he broke my proud mind, he broke my beautiful mate. I was a totally empty shell of a man. The severance curse crawled happily over my brain, erasing my warm memories, turning me back into the perfect, cold, unfeeling weapon Silas always wanted. While her pulse raced in my memory, the real world faded totally away to nothing. I couldn't smell the damp mold anymore. I couldn't feel the biting silver. I couldn't even feel my own slow heartbeat. Deep down, she knew the truth about me. She knew I was a coward who couldn't protect her from the dangerous fire. By the time the damp dungeon grew completely pitch black, I closed my tired eyes and welcomed the sweet, quiet death of my broken soul. I was ready to fade away into the shadows forever. And just like that, the monster finally won, leaving only a dark, empty void where my loving heart used to be. Chapter 18. As the truth unraveled in the pitch-black dark, my mind played a cruel, terrible trick on me. I was standing in an empty, gray wasteland inside my own dying brain. I looked around and saw a giant, ancient oak tree. It looked huge and totally unbreakable from the outside, but when I touched the rough bark, the whole tree instantly crumbled into dry, dead dust. It was completely rotten from the inside out. That fake, rotting tree was me. Because I was too scared of being weak, I let the evil curse grow roots in my mind. Silas didn't really destroy me. I did it all by myself. I built the tall walls. I locked the heavy doors. I threw away the shiny key. I chose to be a cold, cruel monster because I was absolutely terrified of losing someone I loved. And my stupid, selfish fear is exactly what got my sweet Nora killed. I fell to my invisible knees in the gray dust, weeping bitterly for the beautiful girl I ruined. But then a strange, ancient voice whispered from the very bottom of my soul, "Awaken the first blood." What did that old, mysterious whisper mean? Whose voice was hiding deep inside my dying wolf? I had no energy left to figure it out. I waited for the gray dust to blow completely away. I waited for my last breath. Yet, something incredibly strange suddenly happened. In the stillness that followed, a tiny, faint pulse echoed softly against my chest. Thump. I didn't believe it at first, it was just a stupid dream. But then it happened again. Thump, thump. With every heartbeat, the dead, gray air in my mind suddenly shifted. A tiny, tiny wisp of a smell drifted right past my nose. It was incredibly faint, but it was absolutely real. Lavender and clean spring rain. My human eyes snapped wide open in the dark dungeon. The physical pain of the silver chains rushed right back, but I didn't care at all. Because true love is so much stronger than any dark magic, our beautiful mate bond wasn't totally dead. It was just buried very deep. Nora was still out there somewhere. She was alive. As her wolf stirred, a brand new, terrifying fire violently exploded in my veins, giving me the desperate, burning strength to claw my way back from the absolute dead. Chapter 19. The faint, beautiful scent of rain and lavender hit my bleeding nose like a violent thunderbolt. Because the sweet mate bond was actually pulsing deep inside my chest, a wild, reckless hope exploded in my dark mind. Nora was not dead. She survived the terrible fire. She was out there right now, fighting for her life in the cold woods. Have you ever watched a master blacksmith forge a mighty steel sword? He thrusts the raw metal directly into the hottest, brightest fire, and he beats it mercilessly with a heavy iron hammer until all the ugly impurities are completely burned away. That hot, brutal forge was my soul right now. Instead of fighting the wild beast, I did the absolute unthinkable. I completely surrendered to the wolf. I pulled the massive feral animal right up into my human mind. I didn't try to lock him in the cold iron box anymore. I hugged his furious, bleeding spirit tightly. What followed was the most agonizing, beautiful pain I have ever felt. The severance curse violently screamed inside my skull. It tried desperately to rip us apart again. But because my love for my sweet mate was infinitely stronger than Silas's dark magic, the evil curse finally began to crack. In that moment, a blinding hot light washed over my vision. I stopped screaming, and I started growling. A low, terrifying, rumbling grrr-roll vibrated right through the dungeon walls. As if fate demanded it, my human muscles swelled with unnatural raw power. My bones snapped loudly, but I didn't fully turn into the giant silver beast. I forced a brand new, impossible shape. I kept my sharp human mind, but I took the wolf's thick claws, his glowing golden eyes, and his terrifying strength. We were finally one perfect, undivided soul. Because I was no longer a broken, divided man, I easily ripped my bleeding arms straight out of the glowing silver chains. Crack. The heavy iron shackles shattered into a million tiny, useless pieces. With every heartbeat, the dark magic totally dissolved into thin, gray smoke. I fell heavily to the damp stone floor, panting hard. My terrible wounds were already healing super fast. The hot blood pumping through my strong veins felt like pure, liquid fire. By the time I stood fully up in the flickering torchlight, I was a brand new, lethal predator ready to absolutely destroy the evil man who took everything from me. Chapter 20. Moments later, I kicked the heavy iron dungeon door completely off its solid hinges. Crash! 4 heavily armed pack guards jumped back in pure terror. They raised their sharp silver spears at my chest, but their shaky hands trembled violently. They looked at my glowing golden eyes, and they looked at my sharp, bloody claws. Have you ever seen a blind man look up at the bright, warm sun for the very first time? That pure, electric shock of total clarity is exactly what hit my confused men. Because a true alpha doesn't lead by cruel fear. I didn't kill these misguided warriors. I broke their sharp weapons. I broke their blind loyalty. I broke the dark spell of Silas's nasty lies. I unleashed my massive, integrated alpha aura. It wasn't the cold, heavy, suffocating pressure I used to project. It was a warm, bright, commanding wave of absolute truth. The golden light washed right over them, showing them the pure, uncorrupted strength of a unified leader. Silas betrayed us all, I roared loudly, my voice echoing like a powerful storm. He uses dark magic. He lied to the pack. Before either could speak a single word, the heavy spears dropped loudly to the damp stone floor. Truth be told, they immediately fell to their knees, exposing their soft necks in total submission. They weren't bowing to a cruel tyrant anymore. They were faithfully answering the wild, true call of their real alpha. Get up, I ordered firmly, flexing my sharp, silver-tipped claws. We are hunting a traitor. Soon after, I sprinted right out of the dark dungeon, and the 4 brave guards chased closely behind me. We burst out into the cool, dark night. The pack village was totally silent. As the wind shifted, my super-enhanced nose caught the exact scent I desperately needed. Dark ozone, burning sulfur, and sweet lavender mixed with fresh terror. Silas had dragged Nora deep into the whispering woods. He was heading straight for the ancient ritual circle. Because he needed a powerful sacrifice to make his dark magic permanent, he was going to kill my sweet mate under the bright full moon. As a result, a brand new, terrifying urgency propelled me furiously forward into the deep, dark trees. Chapter 21. With every step he took, Silas sealed his own bloody doom. I ran faster than the cold winter wind. My loyal guards struggled to keep up with my impossible speed. We ran through the thick mud. We ran through the dark shadows. We ran straight into hell itself. Meanwhile, I seamlessly shifted back and forth between man and beast. When a giant fallen oak tree blocked the dark path, I leaped over it as the massive silver wolf. When thick, thorny vines tried to trap my legs, I shifted to a man and violently tore them apart with my sharp hands. The transition was so incredibly smooth and perfect. I was finally whole. As the sky darkened with thick rolling storm clouds, a bright purple light suddenly pulsed through the trees ahead. We burst violently into a large circular clearing. Just like that, my raging heart stopped completely dead in my chest. Nora was tied tightly to a giant, flat stone altar right in the middle of the clearing. Her beautiful face was covered in dirty soot. and her thin clothes were totally torn. But she was fiercely alive. She struggled wildly against the thick ropes. Elder Silas stood proudly over her. He held a jagged, glowing black knife high in the air. "You are too late, Kieran." Silas laughed wickedly, his oily voice dripping with pure evil. What's worse, that shiny blue moonstone ring on his finger caught the bright moonlight. Why did he have my murdered mother's ring? In the span of a breath, the horrifying truth hit my brain like a speeding train. The dark rogues didn't kill my loving parents all those years ago. Silas did. He murdered them so he could steal the powerful pack, and he raised me to be his perfect brainwashed weapon. Because the absolute betrayal burned hotter than 1,000 bright suns, pure, righteous fury completely consumed my soul. "Let her go," I roared, my voice shaking the very dirt beneath our feet. Silas just smiled his ugly, cold smile and swung the dark knife down toward Nora's soft chest. Before the deadly blade could strike, I launched my massive body into the cold air, preparing to tear the dark monster apart and save my beautiful mate from the bloody altar. Chapter 22. I hit Silas exactly like a massive, speeding freight train. Smash! My heavy body crashed right into his chest, and we rolled violently across the hard dirt. The glowing black knife flew right out of his pale hand, and it shattered loudly against the cold stone altar. What followed was pure, blinding chaos. Silas screamed in absolute rage. He slammed his hands onto the wet ground, and he summoned a dozen giant, smoky shadow beasts. They hissed, they snapped, they clawed at the air. "Protect the mate!" I roared loudly to my 4 loyal guards. Without hesitation, my brave warriors clashed violently with the nasty shadows. They thrust their silver spears, fighting fiercely to protect Nora. Meanwhile, Silas pulled a dark, glowing wooden staff from his long black coat. He pointed it right at my heart. A massive, hot blast of purple lightning shot out. It hit my chest incredibly hard. It burned my skin, and it threw me backward into the mud. Because the old me would have died from that dark magic, Silas laughed his evil, oily laugh again. But I was not the old me. With every heartbeat, the powerful silver wolf inside my soul healed my burning skin. I pushed myself up from the dirty mud. My golden eyes glowed brighter than the full moon. Have you ever felt true, unstoppable power? It isn't found in dark magic. It is found in having something precious to protect. Without warning, I lunged forward. I shifted into the massive wolf midair, dodging another purple blast. Then, I shifted seamlessly back to a strong man right as I landed in front of him. I grabbed his dark wooden staff with both hands. I squeezed it hard. Crack! The evil weapon splintered into tiny, useless pieces. Before he could run away, I grabbed Silas by his expensive black coat, and I threw him violently against a giant oak tree. I broke his weapon. I broke his pride. I broke his evil reign forever. "You are finished," I growled darkly, my voice completely shaking the damp forest floor. Because my guards easily destroyed the last shadow beasts, they quickly rushed over and wrapped Silas tightly in heavy silver chains. As the thick smoke finally cleared away into the night sky, the dark battle was totally over, leaving me to turn slowly around and face my beautiful, terrified mate. Chapter 23. In the quiet that followed, the ancient woods completely held their breath. I walked slowly over to the cold stone altar. My hands shook badly, but I used my sharp claws to gently slice the thick ropes binding Nora's wrists. She gasped for air, rubbing her sore skin. Then I deliberately shifted all the way back into my human skin. I was completely naked. I was covered in sticky black soot. I was bleeding from a dozen deep cuts. I didn't want to look strong. Because I needed her to see my true, unbroken soul, I fell right down to my bare knees on the wet grass. When I was a tiny boy, I accidentally broke my mother's favorite glass vase. I hid in a dark closet for hours, completely terrified she would hate me forever. But when she found me, she didn't yell. She just hugged me tightly. I was that terrified little boy right now, desperately praying for grace. "Nora," I choked out, and hot tears spilled freely down my dirty face. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry for everything." Do you know what real forgiveness tastes like? It is the sweetest, warmest thing in the entire world. Instead of turning away, Nora slipped quietly off the cold altar. She dropped right down to her soft knees in the mud next to me. She touched my scarred chest. She touched my bloody face. She touched my broken soul. "The curse is gone," she whispered softly, her pretty brown eyes shining with fresh, happy tears. "It is gone forever," I wept openly, leaning my heavy head into her soft, gentle hands. "The monster is dead. Only the man, and the wolf who loves you, is left." Between one breath and the next, she wrapped her thin arms tightly around my thick neck. She pulled my face close and she kissed me. It was a desperate, messy, steamy kiss, a fiery explosion of pure love and raw relief that completely ignited my tired blood. As the bond pulsed brightly back to life inside my chest, a warm, golden light wrapped around our connected souls, sealing us tightly together for eternity. Chapter 24. Eventually, the long, freezing winter slowly gave way to a bright, beautiful spring. We completely rebuilt her tiny cabin on the fringes, but it wasn't an outcast's lonely shack anymore. It was a grand, warm home made of strong pine and bright glass sitting right on the edge of the lush, whispering woods. Because I finally understood what true alpha strength was, I banished all of Silas's old, cruel laws. Silas was locked deep in the dark, damp dungeon, exactly where he truly belonged. On the other hand, the pack was absolutely thriving. I ruled with fairness, I ruled with empathy, I ruled with my beautiful mate right by my side. The pack members loved Nora's sweet, healing heart, and they deeply respected my balanced, unified spirit. One warm evening, I stood happily on our wide wooden front porch. I wore a simple gray shirt and soft jeans. The sunset painted the sky in bright orange and deep purple. Without a sound, Nora stepped out the front door. She wrapped her soft, warm arms tightly around my waist from behind. She pressed her sweet face against my broad back. She still smelled perfectly like fresh lavender and clean spring rain. "What are you thinking about, Alpha?" she teased softly, her breath warm against my skin. I turned around slowly, and I pulled her small body flush against my hard chest. I looked deeply into her bright, happy eyes. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am," I murmured, my voice a low, rumbling purr. She smiled that beautiful smile, and she pulled my head down for a slow, passionate kiss. It was deep. It was incredibly tender. It was full of burning, electric desire. My hands tangled in her soft hair, holding her like the most precious treasure in the world. We survived the burning fire. We survived the dark magic. We survived my own terrible fears. And just like that, the divided monster was completely gone forever, leaving only a whole, happy man standing peacefully in the arms of his true, fated mate. The end.